In the ever-shifting world of global oil markets, a silent war is being waged, not on the battlefield, but on the high seas. The United States has just executed a high-stakes operation. 2 tankers tied to Venezuela's controversial oil exports have been seized. The operation unfolded in back-to-back maneuvers. The first tanker, a Russian-flagged vessel, Marinera, was pursued relentlessly for nearly 2 weeks. It traveled through the icy waters between Iceland and Scotland. The second tanker, MT Sophia, was intercepted in the Caribbean Sea, accused of conducting illicit activities in international waters. These actions aren't just about enforcing sanctions. They mark a dramatic escalation, a battle for control of one of the world's most coveted resources, oil. Global powers are clashing, but the biggest question remains: what price are we willing to pay for control over the lifeblood of nations? And the most critical question of all, will this move topple the fragile balance in Venezuela, a nation with the world's largest oil reserves, now teetering on the brink of economic collapse? Who wins and who loses? This is no longer just a battle for crude oil. It's a battle for the future of Venezuela and perhaps for the future of the global oil market itself. But how did we reach this boiling point? To understand the magnitude of these actions, we must first look at the context. Venezuela's oil has always been its lifeblood, but for years, it's been a resource controlled by a government caught in international isolation. The US has made it clear it will stop the flow of Venezuelan oil at any cost. And this is where the tactics become critical. Sanctions and economic pressure are tools, but military intervention is a different game entirely. This isn't the first time the US has targeted Venezuela's oil exports. But now, the US is striking at the heart of Venezuela's economy. With global maritime trade routes as the battleground, the question is no longer just whether Venezuela's oil will be sold, but who will control it, and how far the US is willing to go to ensure it remains out of the hands of the Venezuelan government. This is about more than just a geopolitical struggle. It's about the global flow of oil, and the stakes couldn't be higher. With oil prices hanging in the balance, the US has positioned itself as the enforcer of a new order. But as global powers like China and Russia push back, we're left to wonder, how long will this tension simmer before it boils over? To truly understand the implications, we need to look at the history of this conflict. Venezuela's relationship with oil has always been complex. For decades, it has been one of the world's top oil exporters, holding the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. But in recent years, economic mismanagement, political corruption, and international sanctions have crippled the nation's oil industry. The country's once thriving oil sector now operates in a state of collapse. This is where the shadow fleet comes in. Venezuela, desperate to maintain its oil revenues, has turned to hidden networks, ships flying false flags to evade detection. These tankers, often operating under different names and nationalities, are part of a larger effort to skirt the sanctions. But the US is watching, and the global maritime system is beginning to crack under the strain of these covert operations. The question is, can Venezuela continue to hide its oil exports from the world? Or will the international community, led by the US, close the net? This is not just an issue of economic sanctions. This is about controlling global oil flows and maintaining the balance of power in an increasingly unstable world. Then, just as the dust seemed to settle, a new crisis erupts. The Marinera tanker, after weeks of pursuit, is boarded by US forces in a dramatic operation. This is no ordinary ship. It's a Russian-flagged vessel caught in a web of international tension. The US calls it a stateless ship because it had been sailing under a false flag. The fact that the vessel was Russian makes this operation even more explosive. Russia, a key ally of Venezuela, has condemned the seizure. The Kremlin demands that Russia's nationals aboard the ship be treated properly and returned. But the U.S. stands firm. The seizure is justified under international law as the ship violated U.S. sanctions. As the situation unfolds, the geopolitical stakes are raised. It's no longer just about Venezuela. Now, the U.S. and Russia are locked in a high-stakes diplomatic standoff. The world is watching as two global superpowers clash over the fate of one tanker. What does this mean for global energy security? And more importantly, what happens next? But the question remains, what is really behind this operation? What is the hidden mechanism that drives these actions? At the heart of this crisis lies a complex web of sanctions. The U.S. is not just targeting the oil itself, but the entire network that allows Venezuela to continue exporting its crude. The shadow fleet is a key part of this network, and the U.S. knows that to truly choke Venezuela's oil exports, it must disrupt these covert operations. But the mechanics are even deeper. This is not just about Venezuela. It's about sending a clear message to the world. Sanctions are no longer enough now. Military intervention is on the table. The U.S. is prepared to enforce its sanctions through force if necessary. But this raises a dangerous question. What happens when global powers start militarizing sanctions? What happens when the lines between law enforcement and military action blur? The U.S. may claim this is all about enforcing international law, but the rest of the world sees it differently. Some argue that these actions threaten the principle of national sovereignty and the freedom of navigation on the high seas. As if to underline the stakes, another crisis erupts just days after the seizure of Marinera. The MT Sophia, another tanker, is intercepted in the Caribbean. Once again, this is no ordinary ship. It is part of the same shadow fleet that the U.S. is targeting. This tanker was involved in illicit activities, running crude oil between Venezuela and the outside world in defiance of U.S. sanctions. The U.S. Coast Guard's operation to seize the vessel was swift. It was a highly coordinated effort designed to leave no room for escape. But what's more troubling is what's hidden beneath the surface, the larger network of sanctions-busting activity. These operations may seem like isolated events, but they are part of a larger, coordinated effort to strangle Venezuela's economy. Each tanker seized is a small victory for the U.S., but a massive blow to Venezuela's already fragile economy. Yet, the question remains, what happens when the shadow fleet is no longer able to operate? What happens to Venezuela's oil reserves, and what are the long-term consequences for global oil markets? While global powers battle over the fate of Venezuela's oil, the most profound impact is being felt on the people themselves. For the citizens of Venezuela, this isn't just a geopolitical struggle, it's a fight for survival. As the U.S. tightens the noose on oil exports, the Venezuelan government faces mounting pressure. The blockade of oil means less revenue, which directly impacts the nation's ability to provide for its people. Basic goods are in short supply, and inflation continues to spiral out of control. For Venezuelans, each day is a struggle for food, a struggle for medicine, and most importantly, a struggle for dignity. But there's another side to this story. While the U.S. government insists its actions are in the interest of global security, for the average Venezuelan, it feels like yet another blow in a long list of hardships. And it begs the question, who are the real victims in this conflict? The Venezuelan people or the powers trying to control their future? While the U.S. and Venezuela grapple for control over oil, the global stage is also being reshaped. These actions are having far-reaching effects, not just in the Caribbean or Venezuela, but across the entire world. Geopolitically, the ripple effects are already being felt. Venezuela's close allies, like Russia and China, are making their voices heard. Russia especially, has condemned the US operations. Moscow has demanded that its nationals aboard the seized ships be treated with respect and called for the immediate return of the Marinera. China, a key buyer of Venezuelan oil, has also voiced its opposition, accusing the US of threatening global energy security. But the US sees it differently. It's positioning itself as the enforcer of a new order, one where nations abide by the rules of international sanctions. This is about more than just Venezuela's future. It's about how global powers navigate the delicate balance of energy security and national sovereignty in a rapidly changing world. The world is divided. Some countries will side with the US, while others will back Venezuela, Russia, and China. The question is, what happens when these powers collide? How will global markets, politics, and trade be shaped by this ongoing confrontation? As we look to the future, three possible scenarios emerge. Each one hinges on how the global powers and Venezuela itself respond to the unfolding crisis. The best-case scenario is a negotiated resolution. Venezuela, backed by its allies, finds a way to restart its oil exports within the framework of international law. Sanctions might be lifted, and the country could slowly begin to recover. The global oil market stabilizes and tensions ease, but this path requires mutual cooperation, a willingness to compromise, and a return to diplomacy. The middle scenario sees an ongoing stalemate. Venezuela continues to suffer under the weight of sanctions, but the US faces mounting pressure from its allies and adversaries. Russia and China dig in their heels, leading to a prolonged geopolitical standoff. The oil markets remain volatile, and Venezuela's economy stays trapped in crisis. The situation stagnates, with no clear resolution in sight. The worst-case scenario, however, is one where the situation spirals out of control. Tensions between the US, Venezuela, and its allies escalate. Military intervention intensifies, leading to a broader conflict. The global economy suffers from energy disruptions, and the oil markets are thrown into chaos. Venezuela's suffering deepens, and the geopolitical landscape is forever changed. This would mark the breaking point for international diplomacy, and the world would feel the weight of these decisions for years to come. As we close this chapter, one thing is clear: the battle for Venezuela's oil is far from over. The US, Venezuela, and its allies will continue to clash. But the real question is, what will this mean for the future of global energy? In the end, this conflict is about more than just oil. It's about power, control, and sovereignty. It's about how global superpowers influence the fate of nations and how ordinary people are caught in the crossfire. We are witnessing a new phase in international relations, one where sanctions, military force, and geopolitical maneuvering are the tools of the trade. But as the stakes rise, so does the potential for chaos. The world is more interconnected than ever. A single action in one part of the world can ripple across borders, affecting us all. This is just the beginning. What happens next will shape the future of global politics and the future of oil for generations to come. Stay informed, because in this new world order, the lines between diplomacy, economics, and military might are blurred, and the consequences are greater than we can imagine.